Welcome to Artistic Adventures. We're going to start working on Zombie Billy in this next part of our Hocus Pocus project. So let's get started. Here's a quick look at a picture of Zombie Billy, one of many you can find on the internet. And just to take a look at his skin color and, kind of the basic shape. Like he's got a lot of dark circles around his eyes, and that's marks on his cheek where it's sunk into the skeleton and the tendons, and also, his mouth is sewed shut. Yeah, that's funny. Anyway, I wanted to just take a quick look at that. I'm going to kind of use that as my guide. I'm going to use this Monster High male doll that I had, and I've taken off his hair, and it was kind of actually a headpiece, and it left a hole in his head, as you can see there. And it's not really like a smooth scalp, but we're going to put the hair kind of around on the edge, so it won't really matter. So the first thing we're going to do, really though, is take off his painted face and everything with this acetone. So I'm just using some Q-tips, and this was a used doll, like all my Monster High dolls. I get them off of eBay or something, and it's pretty dirty. So not just the paint part, but the face itself really needed a lot of cleaning. So I decided to leave the earring in his hair. Billy didn't really have an earring, but I like the earring. I'm also taking the green scales off of his upper arm on that one side, and just finishing touches up, trying to get all the dirt and paint off of his face. And then I did wash it with soap and water to sort of just give it another gentle cleaning. And now, as I do with most of my dolls, I put down a matte medium using this Liquitex, and I'm going to use a brush with it just because I'm going to be painting over this, so it doesn't really matter how smooth or whatever this looks, although it does tend to smooth out pretty well if you put on a thin coat. I use matte medium to protect the plastic. That way, if you want to take this face off at some point, the paint that you put on it is not going to stain it. And it helps provide sort of a tacky surface, or tooth, as we say, to help the paint stick to it. Now, I'm also doing his hands because his hands are going to be sticking out, and I'm going to do part of his neck because that may show. The costume he's in is sort of a colonial type costume with a ruffled neckline and sort of a cravat, I guess, or scarf, and then he had the lace around the sleeves as well. For the skin, I'm going to I'm just taking this white and I'm mixing in both black and blue because he had sort of a bluish tinge to him, although it could have just been, the nighttime graveyard scene. I don't know, but to me, he looked sort of grayish blue. This is kind of how I viewed him. So that's kind of how I'm going to mix up this paint to look. And really just need a dab of each. I go slowly because when you put dark colors in light colors, you really don't need a lot. You can get too much really quickly. I did put, I believe it was 2 coats of paint. The first coat tends to leave a little bit of the flesh tint coming through, and as you'll notice, I am going down on the neck. Now, I did it with his face at a fairly straightforward position because it's top of the neck, is a ball shape so that his head can sort of move around a little bit. So I decided, just to put him in sort of a neutral, straightforward position, not really looking down or up or whatever. So, because if you did, some of the skin color is going to come through, and you don't want to paint underneath that because it would make the head stick, and then you couldn't move the head at all if you wanted to. All right, so I'm moving on to, I believe, the second coat. And although you can't tell on the video because of the magic of editing, I did leave this to dry overnight because I wanted to make sure I could, put down my pastels and paint and everything on it, and it would be a nice smooth surface that was fully dry. Okay, so this is coming back the next day, which was actually today, and took another look at his face. And I'm going to I set my iPad up so I can kind of refer back to that while I'm working. But the first thing I'm going to do is take some black pastel with a really short bristled brush that is actually I think it's for eyebrows. I think this is like an eyebrow brush. I can't remember exactly, but it's nice for working on the dolls because it doesn't move around a lot. You can pretty much count on the product going where you put it. So I'm just basically circling around the outside of where the eye will be with this black pastel chalk. And I do later on come in with some acrylic paint to define it a little bit more, but I really like how it sort of has that smudgy shaded look, and that's really how it looks around his eyes. It's really the shadow from his eyes being really sunken in that causes that dark look. So, that happens when you're buried for, like 100 years or whatever, however long he was buried. So, just coming over here to do the other side, and also the nose had that sort of skeletal look, so I had that stripe down the center, and I'm going to also elongate the nostrils a little bit, and then I'm just making these dark marks. I'm going to work on those a little bit as we go along, but to sort of give that impression of the way that his cheeks had sunken in, and you sort of see the tendons underneath the skin stretching and the muscle as he, continues to decompose. I'm also putting shadow under his chin here just to define it and to just give it a more, I think it's kind of a spooky look, to really chisel that out and make it look more skeletal. So when you're doing this, you just remember that where you put dark sinks things in, and where you put light brings them forward. So I'm using that really, because he's so monotone, I'm really just using dark and light to bring forward areas of, if you had a decomposed body, which I don't, I promise, I do not have a decomposed body. But if you did, what you would see is that the areas of the skeleton beneath the skin are going to become prominent, and the areas where there were fat, tissue, so like your cheeks, that's going to deteriorate and go away. So that's going to sink in. So that part will be dark. Now the lips, which really should have sunk in, but because they're a prominent part of the story here with his mouth being tied together, I guess, they're still kind of normal looking. So I'm putting the white over the areas where, like you would say that the brow bone would be sticking through to the skin, and the under on the top of the cheekbone, and then the jawline here, I'm putting some white to shadow that. And the way I do that is I just get some paint on the brush, really dryish, not real wet, and then just sort of use it to make that shadow. And then took some black paint and just sort of went into the nostril and then came down a little bit so that it's elongated, and that gives it more of that skeletal look. And I also used some white on either side of the nose to make that look more pronounced, like the sides of the nasal cavity. I did put the black paint into the parting of the lips. That's going to be sort of a focal point, that lip area, when we put the stitches in. Yeah, we're going to give them stitches. Yeah, we are. This is kind of fun. I really kind of like doing, these unusual things like this. Like, how are we going to do it? How's it going to look? That kind of thing. So, so the next thing we're going to work on for him is more with the eyes. I did put at least 2 coats of the white paint to really make sure that those eyes stand out. I really want those to be really starey, like those are really that, and his lips, the eyes coming out of the dark, out of the grave. We see his eyes. So I did want that back sclera to be very white, and I needed at least 2 coats of paint on that. He did have some sort of wrinkles on his forehead. again, like sagging skin. I don't know, maybe. And then I'm putting a little bit more detail. I took a little bit of water to mix with the black paint so that it's not so completely black, to make some marks on the lip and outline the lips, and also to do those lines on the forehead. Where you want it to be not so dramatically dark, mix it with some water. Here where I'm doing the irises and everything, it is pretty much just black paint. Now in the picture it sort of looks like his eyes are kind of a bluish silver color, so I'm just going to make them a light blue. I think that'll be the best contrast because I really don't want to give him sort of like a brown eye or whatever, because I just want him to look really ghostly and dead. And I think the blues, sticking with the blues and the grays and the black and white is just the best thing for poor Billy. I think the story was, if I remember from the movie, that he was Sarah's boyfriend, Sarah the pretty one, and she caught him with Mary, so she sewed his mouth, or I guess there was a spell that sewed his mouth together and killed, and then he died. I'm not sure if I remember exactly how. I got to go back and watch that movie again. I keep forgetting parts of it now. But anyway, that's why he has his mouth sewed together, and because he betrayed Sarah. And yet, when he comes out of the grave in the movie, she's still like, "Hi, Billy." That's really my favorite part of the movie. I think that's so funny. All right, so I've got the light blue into the irises, and now I'm just going to do the pupil with some black. And I actually had to go back later and put the white mark in after I had actually done the hair because I forgot to do it. The little twinkle in the eye, and that does give it a nice look. So I'll show you that later on in the film. But everything's looking pretty good the way I would just want him to look, spooky and dead, and, sort of skeletal. I'm sure there's lots of ways to do it. This is my way. All right. And I'm just putting some extra little shadows down at the bottom of those to sort of make it look even more sunk in and not so much like it's just 4 marks on his face. Kind of want it to come down into a point, like that's the tendon stretching up to the cheekbone. Because this face is actually pretty round, and the Billy face, if you look at it, it's kind of narrow and thin. So I'm also going to shade the hands, and then same theory, areas where the bone's sticking up, I'm not putting the shadow, but in between that I am, and then also creases over the knuckles where, the fingers would have bent, and then I'm also painting the fingernails black because they would have rotted off, right? They would be rotted by now, yeah, so they're black. So just doing little touches because his hands will be showing. Probably not the underside so much. I'm not that worried about that, but the upper side. And he has these 2 fingers that are stuck in the middle together, so I put a shadow in between those just to delineate them a little bit more. And again, painting his nails black and putting, a few little fine creases across where the knuckles would be. His hands in that picture were like, the knuckles were like huge, but really dead looking. So that's kind of what I'm trying to achieve, sort of this look like the tendons are sunk in and all that. So, okay, we've got his face and his hands. Now we're going to start putting those stitches on. And so what I'm doing, I'm just taking regular black sewing thread, and I'm going to crisscross it 2 at a time, crisscrossing them over each other. And I'm just putting the glue, I'm just using regular Mod Podge or Elmer's, whatever you want to use, like that, on one side, and then I'll go back in and glue down the other end, just like I kind of do the lashes, because the lips are sticking out. If you try to glue both sides, neither side is going to stick. They'll just both pop up. So I'll just do the top and crisscross those over, and then I can come back, and once the glue is dry on the top, it'll be much easier to bend those threads down and attach them, below to the bottom. This actually went pretty well. I was kind of surprised, knowing me and how I hate doing tiny things like this. It's like my hand, I get right up to it, right ready to put the thread on it, and then my hand shakes. You can kind of see it there, and it's like, ah! I don't know why that happened. Thank God I'm not a surgeon. I'm a nurse practitioner, but I'm not a surgeon. Don't have to do any of this cutting work, at least not in my current job anyway. I used to do some fun things like lancing abscesses and stuff. That was pretty fun. So anyway, and now I'm going to go back under to the edges that are still sticking up, put a little bit of glue. Once again, like we talked about with the eyelashes, if you give those a little minute to get tacky and dry, it's much easier to get them to stick down. That one actually came loose all over, but I really like how this turned out because it's really kind of uneven. It's not exactly symmetrical, so it does look sort of like a witch's curse. I think that's so funny. All right, so for hair, I am going to use alpaca fiber, and I have this fiber that's really odd color. It starts like black on one end, then it kind of gets beige, and then it turns reddish. So I don't really have another use for it, so I think I'm going to use it, and just taking these raw pieces and combing them with my wire pet comb, pet comb. And then I'm using a marker to go into the middle area, because I'm going to cut these in two because his hair is not really that long. I mean, it's long, but it's not that long. And I'm just putting the black on the middle part. So I want his hair to look, rotted and decayed. So I don't want it to look all perfectly black or perfectly brown or whatever. Want it to look like it has some colors that would be involved in decay, like brown and gray, and maybe sort of a yellowish brown color, and we'll just let all those colors sort of combine to give him the look of some decayed hair. Now for the front part, I'm actually going to stick that straight cut part right over the crease there where actually it's just right at the edge of where the gray starts. So I'm covering up that gap where the scalp part is a little bit recessed from the forehead. And so that's going to be the front part. And what I'm envisioning from the picture is like I'll use some of the hair to kind of pull it forward and come down in spiky strings down in the front. And then the rest will kind of be just combed around and sticking out, because he's just been in the casket, and he comes up out of the ground. So it's not going to be a good look. It's just not going to be a good look for him. So I'm going around all the way to the ears with the same process of putting the straight cut edge down. And then I'm going to do the same thing around on the back, where I usually will have the hair facing downward. I'm going to put the first row in facing upward, and then I'll start making it go downward. It's just because of how I want to style the hair at the end. And we're going to, not do the final style till we get him in his outfit as usual, because we'll be moving him around a lot. And I notice I'm putting his face down on a piece of clean paper towel. I just don't want to get, any of this dye or stuff on it and mess up his face. So I'm going to continue with putting some of the marker down in the middle of some of these fibers and then cutting it. I will go back after I get all of the hair in and do some more touch-ups with my markers to give it the complete rotted and decayed look that I want. But this hair is working pretty good for that look anyway, because it's just got a lot of those really earthy tones, like it's been eaten by worms or something. All the zombie jokes. Yes. So anyway, like I said, on this first row on the back, I am putting it facing up towards the crown. And that's just because I think in my mind, some of the back of the neck is probably going to show with the way his hair's sticking out. You could do it either way. Probably really doesn't matter. So that glue, I'm using my E6000. That glue dries pretty fast. So I'm just going to bend that hair down that I've put around the perimeter. And then I'm going to start going in and putting the hair going the other way. And this is the way I normally do it, which is to make the long part facing down and the short part facing up near the crown, the part that we glue. And then we're just going to go around in a circle, or really kind of more of a U shape, because we got that hole in the front, and I'll show you what we're going to do with that here when we get to it. Yeah, so just put your little rows of hair and keep coming on around to that whole part. And then I think I've forgotten to put the hair the other way there. Yeah, he's going to look really interesting. But I really like how this hair looks, like all the variegated colors. Okay, so we got this hole here. So what we're going to do, I'm going to take a piece of the alpaca fiber and not cut it in the middle. I'm going to fold it in the middle. And we're going to stick the fold down in that hole with some glue. And then that'll cover up the hole for us. You shouldn't be able to see it. Although with his hair all sticking up, it'll be hard to see anyway. So I'm just put the glue top against it and squeezed some down in the hole. Then I'm going to take this piece long, put the middle over it, and then I take my pointy tool and just push the hair down into the hole. And I kind of twist it so that hair doesn't stick to it when I pull it out, so I don't pull the hair out. But that works pretty good. You don't want to be combing this part of the hair, because it'll take a while for that part that's down there to dry. The other part dries pretty fast, but when it's as much as I put down in the hole, then it doesn't get to the air as much. It will take a little bit longer to dry. So I'm not going to really comb it too much while we're working with it here today. I'm just going to style it a little bit and cut it so you can see the basics of where we're headed. And then we'll do the final styling once we get his costume made and everything. Same process. I'm still just putting some marker down in the middle, cutting it. And if you are doing this, I'd use a permanent marker if you can. All right, so there we have him. I just love this hair. This is so funny. I mean, it really does look rotten. So the way I'm cutting this, I want it to be raggedy. I don't want it to look like it's cut off, straight. So I'm just taking my scissors, the pointy ends, and chopping into the hair. And this shortens it, but it also gives it a more natural look, like it's in points as opposed to it being cut straight across. So that's how I'm shortening it. I'm just going around, cutting into the hair. So the scissors are like cutting horizontally into the hair, and then just pulling out those pieces. And then I'm going to take this color, which is sort of a putrid yellowish brown. It's like a baby poo. It's kind of a baby poo color. Yeah. And putting some of that in there. Sort of an earthy color. So maybe he's got some ground in his hair, some dirt in his hair. Combing it just a little bit, just so that I can see if I need to cut it anymore. And then I'm also going back in with my black to get a little bit more of that color in there. I think I'd say his original hair color was probably like a brownish black or dark brown. So after he's decayed, this is the color you get. In case you're wondering, this is the color that you get. Unless you're really old and you had gray hair, then it would be a different color. But he was young when he was witched to death. Those Sanders sisters, they are mean gals. Anyway, just continuing to trim. Like I said, we'll we'll end up pulling some of that forward and some of it back. So not worried too much. There'll be plenty of time after it gets really good and dry for us to comb it out some more and see where we are. I just wanted to show you how I'm getting this down and sort of the theory of how to do dead hair. Yeah, it's my first dead hair, actually. Oh, look, and Zombie Billy just lost an arm. How appropriate. That's so funny. Oh, it'd be funny if other parts fell off. Okay, so this is kind of where we're going to end this today. We've got it pretty much cut the length that we need and the color that that I want. And you'll see I did put the white dot in his eye there afterwards. So that's the hair and the face for Zombie Billy. Yay! So we're going to be working on his costume next, and then we're going to have some fun with the witches and Billy and the cat and the cauldron and everything. So if you haven't already, you want to make sure you subscribe so you don't miss a thing. Thanks, and bye.